This is kind of a topic that I've been wanting to share for quite some time now. If you're on the internet, I'm sure you've noticed that there's probably this trend of basically what I would consider broken relationship mentality. I see it across basically all age groups, millennials, Gen Z, whatever, where there seems to be this kind of rampant surge of infidelity, a poor mindset towards relationships and dating as a whole. You see a lot with these dating apps. You see a lot with these videos trashing men or men trashing women. You see red pill stuff. You see feminist stuff. It's rampant, at least from what I see. So I wanted to kind of give my own 2 cents on many of the topics that people kind of talk about and just give my overall perspective on dating and relationships and what I've learned as someone who is above the age of 30 and who's had a very interesting relationship with the idea of relationships. I want to give a little bit of a background story. Some of the inspiration for me making this video. We just had our 1st year anniversary, me and my wife, and it made me think about some of the advice I'd been given in the past when it comes to relationships, when it comes to marriage, things I've seen from other people when it comes to their relationships, when it comes to their marriages or lack of relationships, and just different perspectives I've had as someone who spent a very long time struggling to get into a relationship and always kind of being the 3rd wheel, the 5th wheel, the 7th wheel. When I was in college, I was like terrible with dating, like completely. I was socially awkward. I'm still a little bit socially awkward, but I was super socially awkward back in college. Could not talk to girls at all. Struggle to even like look at girls, would like shake and like flinch and start sweating a lot and like stuttering and mumbling. It was awful. And I had to go through a very long process of developing myself enough to feel more comfortable with talking to women. I think a lot of this was because when I was in high school, I went to an all-boys school, and I feel like when you're kind of in that teenage age group, there's a lot of development that happens, in my personal opinion, and I think I kind of missed out on that development. I didn't really interact with any girls for the 4 years I was in high school. Like literally my entire routine was I'd wake up, go to class in high school, come back home, play video games. Towards the end of high school, I started getting into martial arts and I started doing robotics, and that was pretty much it. You know, I spent most of my time either working, taking classes, doing homework, or just goofing off and playing video games, or maybe occasionally hanging out with friends at the mall, or hanging out with friends at their house, stuff like that. Did not date at all in high school. I didn't go on my first date until college. I think my sophomore year of college was the first time I went on a date ever. So my view on dating and relationships is a bit nuanced, I think, because I just had such a different experience from what I assume is the case for most people. Now, I chose the college that I went to. I went to Penn State University. I chose that college mainly because I kind of wanted to reinvent myself. I'd heard prior when I was in high school that college was kind of the opportunity to reinvent yourself, to become a new version of who you want to be and try new things. And really, I heard Penn State was a party school. And I figured if it's a party school, that means lots of women. That means more opportunities to kind of be more extroverted, more social, meet more women, go on dates. That was like my own mindset. Like in hindsight, it sounds kind of like ridiculous because a lot of people, when you're in high school, you should be going to college for a career and to have a better future. That was not my objective at all. That was not my mindset. My mindset was purely, I want to go to a college where I could be more social and kind of just become a better version of myself. Now, when I first went to college, sadly, for the first year, like nothing changed. I was more or less the exact same guy I was in high school. I was still like super awkward, super shy. I still remember like it's funny. I remember when I first went to like this party in like college. I think it was like the first month or maybe like within the first 2 months of college. I got invited to this party. It was literally like next door. This one girl I kind of knew because she lived like in the same building as me, invited me to a party that she was throwing. And I went there. I had never drank before in my entire life. So I was like super shy, super awkward. I had like a cup of water, but I pretended like it was alcohol. And I was just like in the corner sipping it very slowly, hoping that no one knew that it wasn't alcohol. Because I felt like so out of place. And I remembered like this girl that invited me to the party. She came up to me and she was just like asking me questions. And she seemed like curious to talk to me, which in hindsight, like as an adult now and someone who's been dating, a decent amount in his 20s, I think she was flirting. But when you're like 17 and you don't have many interactions with women, it doesn't come off as flirting. You're just kind of like, oh, I don't even know what I was thinking at the time, to be honest. I was just like, I think in my head. And I think I just said like the dumbest stuff. And she just kind of like walked away. And oddly enough, she didn't just stop talking to me after that moment. She is crazy for not doing that, because if I was a girl, I would have been like, this guy's weird. I'm just never going to talk to him ever again. But yeah, she was pretty cool. But any sign I think she attempted to throw at me, and this was the case for a lot of other girls in my freshman year of college as well. Any sign that they would try to throw at me, I completely missed. So I share this because I just want you to paint the picture of how socially awkward and how terrible with girls I was in college. But kind of to make a long story short, I did not like that about myself. And it was around, I think 2 years later, I got kicked out of college. I was trying to kind of reinvent myself more and like actively try to figure out what was I doing incorrectly and how can I improve myself. And one of the things was dating. So I would like search for dating coaches and like try to apply the stuff that they would share, apply their tactics. I got into like pickup for a little bit, not the cringy part of pickup or the creepy part of pickup, but more like the philosophy behind pickup, all that stuff. And I would go out, try to practice it. Went on a lot of dates doing that. Tinder was new at the time too, so I used a lot of Tinder. There's an app called like Whisper, tried that. Bumble wasn't out yet. Yeah, just a bunch of dating apps I tried. I tried Match.com. I tried a bunch of stuff. And it led me to some of the conclusions about dating and relationships that I'm gonna share with you in this video. I know that's a long intro, so if you're still here, I appreciate it. But I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background into where some of these philosophies and where some of these mindsets come from, just so they make a lot of sense. So that way it's not just me as some random dude who's married, just talking about nonsense. So the very first thing I want to share, and this one might be a little bit of a controversial take, but it was the first thing that popped into my head when I was making this list. Sex is overrated. And the reason why I want to share this is because I think I see this a lot nowadays. People put way too much emphasis on sex. I think in the modern era, a lot of people put so much emphasis on sex, but the problem is that putting so much emphasis on getting sex from the opposite gender leads to you making bad decisions in the grand scheme of things. I think when I see a lot of girls, what they do is they hypersexualize everything to get the attention of men. And I think if you talk to a girl, she's not going to admit to it. She's going to say, I'm doing this for myself. But if you really were to like look at the breadcrumbs and try to sit there and analyze why someone's doing anything at all, in this case, we're talking about girls, you're doing it for male attention. If men didn't give you attention for the way you dressed, you wouldn't do it because it wouldn't mean anything. It would have no benefit to you. But yeah, this might be a bit of a hot take. I'm not sure how people will interpret this, but I can't speak for women, but I will say that as a guy, at least me personally, but I feel like if a lot of guys were to think about this, they'd come to the same conclusion. Sex in itself is not that pleasurable. It's the anticipation and the buildup that leads to sex that's actually appealing. And so what I mean by this is when you go out, say for example, on a Friday night or Saturday night, you're talking to a bunch of girls, you're probably getting rejected. I think, assuming the rejections aren't like super harsh to the point where it's like demoralizing, that chase and we'll call it adrenaline, even though it's not really adrenaline, but let's just call it that. That dopamine hit that you get from talking to a bunch of girls and maybe getting from point A to point B and then from point B to point C is the part that's exciting. And the cap to all these like emotions is the sex, because the sex feels like I did it. I finally got the goal that I wanted. But then once you get it, you have to start over again to get that same kind of dopaminergic hit. That's the way I see it. I say this because I remember a few years ago, I kind of got burnt out from like dating. And I really sat there and thought about it like step by step. What exactly made me enjoy, or at least make me go through that process of trying to sleep with girls? And really what it came down to was I didn't care about the sex that much. The sex wasn't even that great half the time, especially when it's like a stranger. You just don't care. It wasn't the sex. It was the idea of me feeling validated enough to effectively get some random stranger to accept me to the point where she'd allow me to sleep with her. To me, that was the thing that was like the pleasurable aspect of it. And again, I can't speak for women. I would probably be willing to bet that it's a similar scenario with women. Maybe women feel a bit of validation from men investing in them. But I think that's also, and I don't want to go too deep into a rabbit hole. I think that's actually very problematic. The way women may perceive it. Again, I'm not a woman, so I can't speak on how women feel about this, but I'm just kind of giving my 2 cents based on observation and based on what some women that I've talked to about these things have said. Really, it's just the validation and the build up to the sex that I think is actually interesting, at least for dudes. But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, do I think a lot of young men should pursue sex? Do I think a lot of young women should pursue sex? No, I think it's very overrated. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to benefit your life in any major way. And in reality, it's more likely to destroy your life before it ever does anything to benefit it. All right, number 2, stop listening to almost all dating coaches and gurus. Now, this is my 2 cents on dating coaches and gurus. Most of them are full of shit. And the reason why I say this is because, at least in my experience, when I've looked at a bunch of different dating coaches and gurus, there are some that are fantastic. The ones that are great, you don't hear about as much because I feel like that's the nature of the internet. The quality is always hidden, and those who are the loudest and those who are the most polarizing are the ones that kind of get, we'll call it, filtered to the top of the funnel. But the downside is that the people who are most willing to be loudest and be most polarizing and most controversial are people who are in things more for profit rather than for the sake of actually benefiting other people's lives. I think that's just kind of the reality of the internet. So if you see someone who's like very viral, very popular, I would take what they say with a grain of caution, because chances are he or she is saying certain things not because they're interested in helping you, but they're interested in helping themselves, specifically their bank accounts. Some examples of this. Depending on your age, you may or may not know of a channel called Fresh and Fit. I've watched a lot of their videos, and I found most of their advice to be pretty horrible in the grand scheme of things. I think in certain instances, these things that they share can work. I think they really work on certain quality women. I'm going to call them very low quality women who have very low self-esteem and who don't think very highly of themselves, which is why the tactics work. But if you're someone who's trying to date for the sake of having a happy relationship, I would never listen to anything they say. I've seen the same thing with female influencers, by the way, female dating gurus. There's one female influencer recently, I forget her name. I'll put a picture of her and like her handle and stuff down below. I'm not saying to bully her or harass her. I'm just sharing her information because I can't think of it off the top of my head. But she got into a bit of controversy recently where she met some guy who was an obvious red flag when I heard the story. And she dated him for, I think, like 6 to 8 months. And she got pregnant by this guy. And he instantly cheated on her. But her whole platform is all about her sharing this advice towards women about how to manifest things and how, she knows how to kind of get certain things out of men. Turns out it was all full of crap, because when it came time for her to actually demonstrate the things that she was teaching, she couldn't do it. And not only could she not do it, she ended up in a worse situation than one could. She probably ended up in one of the worst situations you could get yourself into. And again, my 2 cents, if she was skilled at all in what she was preaching, she would have easily spotted the red flags like right away. Like, I heard the story of how she met this guy and I was like, oh my God, how did she not notice this guy was a walking red flag? Dude's a total stalker, but she didn't see it because she's not skilled and because she has no idea what she's talking about. So my overall point is, stop listening to these dating gurus and coaches. People who sell you the idea that they're a dating coach or a dating guru. I'm not saying they're all bad, but I am saying take their advice with a grain of salt and do research on the good quality ones. Take a look at their relationships. Take a look at how they interact with people. Take a look at how people talk about them to get a good understanding of who they truly are and if their advice is truly worth listening to. And be mindful that some of these people online, they have a core group of individuals who all support each other. So you can't take what their friends say about them. You have to take what the general population says about them. Like, if some random person who does not know them, who does not get much from saying positive things about them, is willing to say positive things about them, I would weigh that way higher than someone who's a close personal associate of theirs who says something positive about them. Does that make sense? But yeah. Most of these dating coaches I think are pretty terrible. I think in the grand scheme of things, if you're someone who's trying to find a better quality partner, This has always been my advice. This is what I've learned, and this is what I still find to be true to this day. Focus on one, trying to figure out what the opposite sex wants, specifically the type of person you want to attract. I found that a lot of people, and I don't know if this is in my notes in the future. If it is, then I guess I'm kind of jumping ahead. But I found that a lot of people, what they don't do when they try to date is they don't think about what their values are. They don't sit there and analyze, what do I value in my own life and what do I value out of a potential partner? And then from that point, and you can't be extreme about it. I'm saying this specifically towards women because I've seen a lot of women who have these crazy expectations. It's unrealistic. You're going to be unhappy forever. You're never going to find a perfect partner if your expectations are way too high. Manage your expectations appropriately. Define what your values are. And depending on what your values are, you also work toward being the ideal of those values. So here's an example. If you're someone who values, and this is something I did myself, if you're someone who values an athletic partner, if you're a woman who wants to date an athletic man, or if you're a man that wants to date an athletic woman, focus on being athletic yourself. Don't be someone who's out of shape, but want someone who's in shape. That doesn't make sense. It's a lack of congruency. Be the person you want to attract. If you want someone who has a certain degree of finances or someone who is ambitious, you need to be ambitious yourself. You need to be the kind of person you wish to attract. And I think what a lot of people do, and I know this one I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I want to bring it up because it came to my mind. What a lot of people do is they seek partners who fill up their cups. They're selfish. My belief is that instead of looking for people who are trying to fill up your cup, what you should be doing is filling up your cup first to the point where it's full. And then if someone else comes into your life, they can add to it and they can cause your cup to overflow. But you want their interactions with you to always be a net positive rather than a net neutral or even potentially a net negative. Because if your cup's not full and people come into your life, there's a chance they might take stuff from your cup to add to their own. Effectively, if you're someone whose cup isn't full, that's what you're doing. You're going to other people who have a full cup, ideally, and you're trying to take stuff out of their cup. You attract who you are. So if you're the kind of person with a half cup or with an empty cup trying to get someone else to fill up your cup, you're going to attract people who are doing the same thing to you. They're going to look for people with a full cup and they're going to try to take stuff out of your own cup. Does that make sense? And hopefully that cup metaphor wasn't super confusing, but I don't know, that's the way I kind of see it. No dating coach will ever, or very few dating coaches will ever share that type of insight. They'll tell you how to manipulate, they'll tell you how to finesse people, they'll tell you these tactics to kind of like psychologically cause people distress so that way you get money out of them or so that way you can get like certain gifts from them, all that stuff. Don't listen to these people. They don't know what they're talking about. They deal with the lowest quality people in society. Now sadly, there's a lot of low quality people in society. That's why it seems like they're getting so many people. It's kind of like the quantity versus quality argument. You see some like red pill dating coach in say like Miami, and he might say that he's with a bunch of girls, and it could be true, but you have to take into consideration that quality is rare. So he's not dealing with any quality girls. He's dealing with the worst possible girls. The kind of girls where if you say something mean to them, that gets an emotional reaction out of them, and it makes them easier to get. You don't want those types of girls. You want the kind of girl who, if you say something mean to them or if you insult them, they'll just walk away and they'll never talk to you again because they have a lot of self-respect for themselves. That's the kind of girl you want to go for, I assume, if you want a good quality life. Same with girls. The third thing I would suggest is to narrow down your expectations. Years ago, what I noticed is that a lot of people I'd interact with when they were looking for a partner or when they were trying to date more, they would have no clue what they were looking for when it came to a partner. And my personal belief is that if you don't know what you're looking for, you're almost guaranteed to not find it. I think this is why a lot of people struggle with relationships and dating in general. They have kind of this like wide net of things they're looking for, and it makes it difficult. It's either too wide or too narrow. And if it's too wide or too narrow, I think it's easy for you to miss certain attributes. So let me give an example of what I mean. I tend to find that with guys, qualities they're looking for are way too broad. And by broad, I mean they're willing to accept way too many things. I think with women, it's the opposite, and their qualities that they're searching for are way too narrow, which means that their filter is so high that no one can fulfill the qualities that they're searching for. I was watching a show a few days ago, actually, and they were trying to see who puts up with the most red flags between men and women. And basically the scenario was they would have this one girl, they'd give her like a bunch of like stuff to say that was supposed to be red flags. Like she would say that she cheats, she would say that she's a gold digger, she would say that she's not loyal in relationships at all, she is a hardcore party girl. Just someone that, as a guy, very quickly should cause concern and cause you to want to leave. And they wanted to see like what the guys will tolerate. So she goes on these dates and she's pretty much saying how she's a terrible girlfriend, or she'd be a terrible girlfriend and has been a terrible girlfriend. And they asked the guys at the end, would you be willing to go on another date with her? And do you see yourself potentially committing to her in the future? And all of the guys said yes, despite her being a walking red flag. Now, my belief is that, and I think this is true of most guys, their expectations and their standards are so broad that if a girl is attractive enough, that's all that's required. Like if you ask a lot of guys, what do you look for in a girl? They might say pretty and maybe nice personality. But they're willing to dismiss like nice personality if she's attractive enough. I think if she's attractive enough, most negatives can be overlooked in most guys' eyes. And I think that's a big issue. I think as a guy and as a girl, but in this case we're going to talk about guys first, I think you want to heavily consider what you're looking for in a partner. Like, what are your red flags? What are your deal breakers? You really need to be willing to say no to girls. You should be willing to say no to a girl who's, let's say, hypothetically 10 out of 10 attractiveness, but also 10 out of 10 bad personality. You should be willing to say no in a heartbeat because she doesn't fit your criteria. She doesn't fit the qualities that you're searching for. But realistically speaking, a lot of guys would say yes to that, and I think that's a big problem. Same with girls. I think a lot of girls have too many expectations on men that cannot be fulfilled, especially because the girls themselves don't fulfill it. Like, they'll want a guy who's like super in shape, but they're not in great shape. They'll want a guy who's like super wealthy, but they're not very wealthy. They want a guy who's like super charismatic, but they're not very charismatic. They want a guy that's super intelligent, but they're not very intelligent. You can't expect things of other people that you're unwilling to do yourself, in my personal opinion. And I think the more things you're expecting out of somebody, the harder it is to get that. And when you do find that, you put yourself into a position where you become needy and you are unable to walk away when bad qualities pop up. So, I've seen this a lot. You're a girl who wants a guy who makes a lot of money, who's tall, handsome, all this stuff. You meet that guy. He knows he's tall, handsome, funny, because every girl's been telling him this since he's been a teenager probably, or since he's been an adult, whatever. But because he knows this, he also knows that he can get away with a lot of stuff. He knows that he can emotionally manipulate you. He knows he can cheat on you. He knows he can leave and come back and you'll always say yes. Because why would he, most people aren't so altruistic that they'll be able to, it's kind of like if you know you can rob a bank and get away with it, why would you not? That's kind of like a lot of these guys' mindsets. So because your criteria as a girl is so narrow, and because only like 1 out of like 100 guys can fulfill that very narrow criteria, he knows that if he does A, B, and C, you have no choice but to accept it. And you will accept it because your criteria is so low. It's so tight. Like there's no one else that can fulfill it. So I think my suggestion would be broaden, as a girl, broaden the things you want. Broaden the things you value out of men. And if you do that, you're more inclined to find men who are able to date you. But yeah, so look for value. Like really make a list of values. Make a list of things that you are searching for in a man, or if you're a female watching this, look for things you're looking for in a woman if you're a man watching this. And if you're a woman watching this, look for things you value in men. Real quick, a few kind of things I want to share with you. If you're a man, stop looking solely for women that have big boobs and big butts. And if they always look like they're about to hit the club based on the way they dress, I would avoid that completely. I think if you're a girl that's always trying to hit the clubs, if you need the clubs or the bars to have fun, that means you're really looking for validation. Or you're looking for excess dopamine in the form of alcohol. I think both of those traits are horrible for relationships. So I think if you're a man, avoid them at all costs. Obviously, if you're a girl, the same thing is true. But I think a lot of men go to bars and clubs mainly to try to talk to girls. I really think it's more on the girl to. It's less of an issue, I think, for men than it is for women. Obviously, if a guy's going to a club too much too, then that could be a red flag. But in this situation, I personally find that if a girl is always at the bar or club, or if she dresses like she's about to go to a bar and club all the time, or if she solely has like a nice body, it's not enough of a value. It's not enough of a factor to consider her for a relationship. Second thing, be mindful, and I'm talking to men with this, be mindful of how a girl talks. I tend to find that if a girl is too overt about sharing negative experiences about herself, that's a big red flag. I'd say if a girl is too overt about sharing sexual stories, that's also a red flag. I just tend to find that the kind of girls who have too many negative stories, that's a sign that they themselves have negative characteristics and they're attracting people who maybe bring out those negative characteristics. Does that make sense? Like, I've seen some girls who, for whatever reason, every single guy they've ever dated in their entire lives, they may have dated 10 guys, all of them have been super abusive. Now, if it's one guy, that's not, obviously 1 out of 10 guys might be abusive. I get that. If it's all 10 guys, it says more about her than the men. Because that means that something about her is attracting these really terrible guys into her life and causing them to be abusive. Now, I'm not victim blaming here to a degree. Sometimes I do victim blame. In this situation, I'm not necessarily victim blaming, but what I am saying is that it would come off as if this type of girl has a lot of drama. And the drama is something she's not straying from, it's something she's seeking out. So if you meet this kind of girl and she's gonna bring drama, you must be prepared for the drama she might bring into your life. That's kind of the point that I'm making when I say this. And my suggestion, just avoid that girl entirely. And again, same with girls who talk about sexual stuff. In my personal experience, I have found that a lot of girls don't really bring up sexual stuff too much. My personal theory is that I think girls realize if you're around a guy and you bring up sexual stuff, that makes the guy think that there's a possibility of sex with that girl. And I think a lot of girls in general want to avoid that so they don't bring stuff like that up. Unless they're interested in you, then they might bring it up. But if you meet a girl who like talks too much about like a lot of sexual partners, or she's doing like all this crazy stuff in her free time, I would avoid dating that kind of girl. That's just my 2 cents. I think that'd probably be bad for a relationship. This is more towards girls. If you're a woman, stop screening out guys because of their height. I don't know why. I've met so many girls who will meet a guy who's a certain height. They find out that he's a certain height, and suddenly they lose attraction. I once knew a guy who I think he was like 5'8", and he told this girl that he was like 5'11", and she believed it. And she went like a year or so dating this guy, and eventually she found out that he was 5'8", and she suddenly lost attraction for him. And my thought process was, this is so stupid, because up until you found out that you just don't know how to measure heights, the guy was perfectly fine. Like, when you thought he was 5'11", he was a perfectly fine boyfriend. But once you realized that he was 5'8", you didn't like him, which means that there was nothing ever wrong with him. It's just your perception of who he is that changed. That's it, which is ridiculous. Because obviously if it's something where, I know some girls will say like they like a guy who's taller than them. He was taller than her. Even at 5'8", obviously he was taller than her. She was fine with it. I have my own thoughts about why this height thing matters so much. I'll save that for another video if you guys are watching this, and if you're interested, leave a comment below. But yeah, if you're a girl, stop screening out guys because of height. Most guys are going to be taller than you, except that if you're looking for a guy who's going to be like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", that's fine. You can want what you want. But like I kind of mentioned earlier, you have to take the good with the bad.